Okay, our final part of the War on Terror here, part four. So, we want to finish this off by talking about the modern War on Terror and what the Democrats' legacy with this has left us. And that is not, not in great straits. When all the Democrats who just thought they were helping Clinton got on board with whatever he and his administration said about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, um, which was that they were still there, that he was a menace. They all got on board with that, and they all then voted to expand the war on terror, as Bush described it, into Iraq. But soon after, and a lot of this was done because they needed to get reelected. But as soon as they got reelected, as soon as they felt comfortable that the tides have turned, they changed their mind. And a lot of them reneged on their backing of the expansion into Iraq in order to hurt Bush. And this has been gone over and over and over again about the reason they did it and the lies they had to manufacture in order to do it, saying that they were left out of meetings even though they had the exact same intelligence from the people who briefed the Bush administration, like as if there was some kind of secret meetings going on and somehow the information was only given to one party and not the other party somehow, as if this could even happen. I don't know. The conspiracies run as long as my arm. But suffice to say that many of them, most of them, backed away. Now, not every one of them voted for it in the first place, and they were more consistent. But for those who originally voted on it and then took it back for stupid reasons, made up reasons, asinine reasons, shame on them. And of course, one of those reasons had to do with WMDs. In fact, if you ask most people why the Democrats reneged and stopped backing the war on terror, it's because we, quote unquote, didn't find any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which were somehow promised to us by the Bush administration. Except, not so much. They were actually promised to us by the Clinton administration and all the people backing his play, and the UN who said so, and all the rest. Bush simply was handed this intelligence from the previous administration, assumed it was correct, maybe found some other information to that effect between 9/11 and the time he went after Hussein, and which backed it up. It was all part of the same information. Nothing changed. It was the same information moving forward. But now all of a sudden Bush, who's now the president, is able to massage it, change it, alter it, lie about it. It's the same information. Clinton said it was there, Bush said it was there. How is he the only one lying? How is it that he is the only one now lying about weapons of mass destruction? Logic and liberals, they never connect. So now it's Bush lied and people died and all this other BS that honestly is shameful to even put on him. Because it really has nothing to do with him. Or Clinton, for that matter. I mean, the truth of the matter is the truth of the matter. And that was weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq. Not all of them were found. Some were not found. Some were not accounted for. And we wondered, what happened to them. The question should not have been, why did we not find any when we went into Iraq the second time during the second Gulf War, or the Iraqi War as it's often called? But where did they go? That's the question that should be asked. That's the question I asked in my book. The answer is not 100% known. However, at the very start of the war, when we were advancing into Iraq from the south, satellite picked up a large convoy of trucks that obviously weren't ours because they were near the Syrian border, crossing into Syria. We were nowhere near there. And it is believed that the trucks contained chemical weapons. Now you say, well, how would you possibly know that? Well, that was the intelligence, not from the powers that be at the time. And of course, 10 years later, the Assad regime in Syria is suddenly able to use gas on his own citizens. Now, where the hell did he get that? He didn't develop his own, or we would have known about it. No, these were, I strongly believe, this was the cache of missing chemical weapons from the Hussein regime in Iraq that was undiscovered by Hans Blix and Unscum and transported by truck into Syria, beginning of the Iraqi war in 2003. Kept theoretically for Hussein, should he survive the war with America and the West, and since he didn't, kept by the Assad regime and used to gas women and children some 10 years later or so, in more recent times. The idea that no weapons of mass destruction were found is also a lie. During the Iraqi war, going through the many different cities and the many different military bases and areas, our military found caches of small amounts of chemical weapons and a lot of delivery systems, missiles and rockets and things that would deliver such things. It was found, not in the quantities we thought, but again, nobody promised anything. But here's another. So aside from that lie being thrown out the door here, there's another aspect of the Iraq War that people constantly forget, purposely forget, in order to justify wimping out and backing out of it, trying to be clever and cool about saying, I wasn't for the Iraq War. Because first they thought it was going to fail before the surge, because again, they were doing it like Vietnam instead of doing it the way it should have been done, tying the hands, handcuffing the soldiers with rules of engagement that couldn't have possibly led to any kind of victory that anyone would recognize, and it became a quagmire once again. And guess why? It's because they did it just like Vietnam. Instead of kicking ass and taking names, they half-assed their way through it, and they got themselves in trouble. It required a surge of extra men, military power, and strategy, new people in charge, to finally overcome and become victorious in that region. But one of the lies that was put out there by liberals and Democrats to try to weasel their way out of backing what needed to be done in Iraq as part of the war on terror was that the weapons of mass destruction was somehow the only reason we went into Iraq. Because they say it so often, because they only mention that as the reasoning that they were given and the reasoning that they backed out when they weren't found, it became the mantra that WMDs were the reason we went into Iraq. And it's not true. We didn't go into Iraq the first time for oil, because we didn't leave with any. And we didn't go into Iraq the second time for WMD. Only. That was a reason, not the reason. What the liberals and the Democrats constantly forget is that the other reasons were just as important. The other reasons that he was sponsoring terrorism, that he had never been prosecuted for a crime of humanity, that he had been found to be a ruthless dictator that was harming his own people, the rape rooms, the other things, that he was routinely, um, that he had broken the agreement with the UN Resolution 1441 in 1998. That he, I mean, it goes on and on and on. There was a dozen reasons why to go into Iraq. WMD was just one. Just one. But that's all the Democrats could hang their hat on because that's the only thing they could that proved it didn't happen or wasn't found. And that was their reasoning. Asinine. Really stupid. Well, they were wrong. We eventually won. We had ground troops still in Iraq, negotiating a way to maintain some kind of force in Iraq. And then Obama became president, and the whole thing went right out the freaking window. Now, he gets rid of all the people in there. He decides that there was no way to negotiate with the current guy who was in charge, the new president of Iraq, and doesn't even try. And a vacuum forms. Meanwhile, over in Syria, where they're having a new civil war, which is starting to spill into Iraq, a new group called ISIS is formed and fills the void and is made stronger by the vacuum in Iraq, where there's no American presence any longer, and there should have been. And they get strong. They beat back the lackadaisical and undertrained Iraqi forces that we left unprepared to defend themselves, and the cities that took American treasure and blood and sacrifice over the course of many years. These cities were one by one given to ISIS, Mosul, Ramadi, and Baghdad. They finally stopped the bleeding and pushed back, and pushed them all the way back in the last year under the Trump administration, and have basically tamed ISIS, hopefully once and for all. But have we learned a lesson here? Have we finally figured it out? It's doubtful. At least not the liberals and the Democrats. They'll never figure it out, because their agenda, which trumps all their other things, forces them to lead with their bleeding hearts. And they cannot prosecute a war with a bleeding heart. I'm sorry, you just cannot do it. You cannot prosecute a war when you hate war. You cannot prosecute war when you hate soldiers. You cannot prosecute war when you hate the military and you don't understand what it's for. Basically, kill people and break things. That's what the military is for. Some say war is diplomacy by other means. When diplomacy this way doesn't work, then you do it this way. No great peace ever came from anything but a major war. Never. Wars lead to peace. Talking rarely ever does. Because some people you just can't reach like this. They have their heart, mind, and other money set to do something, and the only thing that's going to stop them is stopping them. Period. The fact we got out of Iraq early because Obama was, fulfilling some kind of promise to get us out of the Middle East, starting with the hated Iraq War, was premature, to say the least. No other time in history when we defeated an enemy, whether it was Japan or Germany or even Korea, did we back out. In fact, we left troops in both Japan and Europe for almost a decade each, the Marshall Plan and the MacArthur Plan, to revitalize the community, to build the place back up, to get the schools and the infrastructure and the court systems and the everything else back up to a point where they could be self-sustained and monitored and remain a peaceful, benign nation. Even to this day, Japan is under a form of the MacArthur rule law where they cannot have a standing army or air force or navy outside of their own defense, for the purposes of their own defense. That may soon end as the world can trust Japan again. And similar things happened in Germany. But what did we do in Iraq? We just left. And although the Iraqis themselves weren't about to turn into the dictatorial monsters that Saddam Hussein made them, another force came in the form of ISIS and did basically the same thing. They tried to establish a caliphate, and the seat of it was in the middle of Iraq. And they went a long way before somebody finally said, stop, enough. And of course, you're seeing all these people bombing and all these people shooting and all these people doing terrorist acts because it's become faddish until somebody actually gets out the gumption to stop it dead in its tracks with an overpowering force, shock and awe, what some liberals or Democrats might call over-the-top response. It'll never stop. The war on terror goes on, whether we're fighting it or not, whether we think it's there or not. It's happening. And we want to we can either sit back and be the victims of it, or we can turn the tide, be the aggressor, and put the thing down once and for all. It may be that as long as there is Islam, there will never be an end of the war on terror, or the war on Islam, or the war between Islam and the West, as the great Satan, and then the little Satan, and the puppet of Satan, and whatever else. They still claimed that America is the worst thing in the world, and Britain's not far behind, and Israel needs to be wiped off the map. And as long as that mentality exists, we have to fight it. As long as Islam exists, it probably is going to be there, whether they're actually performing terrorist acts or not, whether they're actually bombing people or shooting people or not, whether they're actually recruiting people or raising money or not. Sometimes they're just dormant, and it's just a waiting game, like it was between World War II and the 60s and 70s. But whatever it is, it's still happening. It's always happening. This is not a war that is conventional. You don't have militaries, country against country. It's not, a military uniform against another military uniform. These are people who have picked up the cause of a religion and a extremist mentality in terms of how people should live. Sharia law and some of the most extreme natures of the Islamic faith are a detriment to all things that mean freedom, an absolute antithesis of what America is and should stand for, and should never be allowed to even breathe air in this country, anything that is Sharia or anything like it. And so we have, if you don't want to call it an enemy, we have a contestant. We have a combatant that is who considers themselves our enemy. And I, for one, am not going to be a victim. I'm not going to have my eyes closed and saying, "Oh, it's just the so-called religion of peace." That's smoke and mirrors, folks. Ain't no such thing. It never was, and it never will be. Now, I'm not saying all of Islam has to be destroyed. What I am saying, though, is that the people in charge of the religion that promote violence have to be destroyed, and a new group of people who are in charge of the peaceful aspects of Islam have to be put in place and put in charge. And then the Quran needs to be altered to eliminate all hate and all destruction and all violence in references to it. Until that happens, folks, we will never, ever, ever end this war. That's a downer, I know. We should never end a video on a downer. But I have faith that good always prevails. And if enough evil is perpetrated on good people, they will finally rise up, having had enough, and put the evil down. I just hope that we see it before it's too late. Till the next time, keep fighting.